Hello everyone, welcome back. In this lesson we're going to be covering bash scripting in Kali Linux. Basically today we're going to start with a simple ping command and we're going to work that in up until we get to a ping sweep over an entire network using bash. So let's go ahead and get started. This entire lesson is going to be in the terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and go into our Kali box. So the first thing we want to do is let's look at your IP address. You should have something different here. So my network is 192.168.15 at home, and that's what I'm going to be using today. Yours might be something 192.168.1. It's best to go on your main machine and find out what your network is if you don't already know. So let's get started. I'm going to just go ahead and ping my router, and that sits at 192.168.15.1. You can see that we are getting a reply back. That's good. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to limit our ping just to one count. So if we press the up arrow, we can easily get back to our command here. I'm just going to add a C for count, and the count is 1. I just want to ping once. Okay, so we pinged one time, and now we have our output here. So we can see that there's some information here that we can pull from. And what I really want to do in the long run, I'm trying just to get this IP address pulled. So we're going to sweep the entire network. We're going to ping 254 addresses. And we are going to pull all the addresses that reply. So when we see a reply, we're going to see 64 bytes from IP address. And just to show an example here, I'm going to ping an IP address that doesn't exist in my network. And you're going to see that it just says from 192.168.15.230 is a reply that it's just unreachable. So if we're having unreachable, we're not going to see the 64 bytes from. So what we're going to do then is we're going to grep. So that's our first command here. And grep is basically just pulling out a line that we want. So we're going to pull out 64 bytes. And that's it. It's going to look no different right now because we're only pulling against one address. If we were pulling against a range, all we would now see are the IP addresses that are responding. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and try to narrow it down here to an IP address. So how we're going to do that is we're going to use a command called cut. So we're going to say cut, and then we're going to want to specify what we're cutting against. So we're going to cut against spaces, and I'm going to explain this here in a second. Actually, I got to add a switch of D for delimiter. The delimiter is a space here. And then we're going to say our field is 4. And just to check it, okay. So let's go back and let me explain how we did that here. So we're cutting a delimiter of space. So here are our spaces. And then it's asking me what field I want. I'm saying field 4. So this is field 1, field 2, field 3, field 4, right? So now we're left with this. And we're still pinging here. Another thing we can do is we can output our ping, or just our normal one ping text to a file. And this we learned last time, saving to a file. We can call it ping.txt. And instead of pinging every time, you could do the same thing with cat. So you could say cat ping.txt. It should look like our output here. And then we can continue to grep off that. We could say grep 64 bytes. See, and now we're narrowing it down. So that's all we're trying to do, is we're just trying to keep slimming this down until we get exactly what we want, and what we want is that IP address. So let's cut it down to field 4. Okay, so the same thing here. So what we're left with is an IP address, and then we have this little addition here. So we want to get rid of that colon. So the command for that is, it's going to be sed. And this is basically just going to substitute a string here. And if you follow the syntax I'm using, you should be able to do it accurately. So this is all this is going to do is remove this here. This is the easiest way to do it. Let's go ahead and enter. Okay, now you can see it's gone. So this is our basic syntax. So we can use this syntax again with ping count of 1. We can say 192.168.15.1, and then we'll just copy this over so we don't have to type it. Okay, so you can see it's going to be the same thing. So now what we want to do is we want to turn this into a script. So easy one-liner that we can do before I show you how to write a script is we can do a for IP in, I'm going to say sequence 1 through 254. Say do, and then we're just going to copy this over here and make some changes. And I'm going fast right now. I'm going to slow it down and explain everything to you once we have it typed out. So we're going to say $IP address here, and then I'm going to put an ampersand and say done. Okay. So not the best list, but we can see that it's pulling some IP addresses here for what's active, and we will sort this out here in a minute. Okay, so let's go back to our original syntax and our one-liner here. So we have now cut this down. So we said for IP is a variable. So we're using IP here, and we're saying whatever variable we get out of this sequence 1 through 254, we're going to go ahead and put in here. So this is going to run 192.168.15.1.2.3, etc., all the way through the sequence. So that's your variable. We're just putting the variable in here. Most of it's not different. So we're just saying for your IP variable in $sequence here, this creates your variable. You're going to do, so we're doing a ping, count 1. All this should look the same now, right? And here I added an ampersand because that allows for threading, essentially. It allows for processes to be run at the same time. If we didn't have that, everything would run really slow, and we'd actually have to have another semicolon here and say done. So this didn't give us the best output. This is a way to do a one-liner. I do want to show you how to build a script that should be easier for you. So let's go ahead and say nano ping sweep .sh for our shell script, or our bash script here. So first thing when we're writing a script, we're going to do a pound bang. We're going to say bin/bash. That's where the bash lives. So that's where it's pulling this code from when we type it in. So what we want to say is very similar. We're going to write an if statement first. So let's say if $1 is equal to nothing, then we're going to echo, let's say usage ping sweep .sh network. We'll also echo out example ping sweep.sh 192.168.1. So that gives an example, and then we'll say else. and then we'll write our code here. But let's go back over what we just did. So $1 is an argument. This is your first argument. So when we're going to call a script here, and you can see the usage, we're gonna call this script ping sweep, and once we type a space in, we hit our first argument. So the argument we're going to use is going to be the first 3 octets of our IP address. And that'll make more sense here in a second. Let me go ahead and type out the rest. But what this is saying here is if we do not have an argument, we're going to kick it back and echo how to use it with an example. So that we don't have to include this. This is just nice for somebody if we're writing a script and they don't know, or if we wrote this for ourselves and we kind of forgot how to use it. It's just a quick reminder of how to use the script. So very, very similar. We're going to say for IP I'm going to use it this way, sequence 1 through 254. So instead of $ in the parentheses, we can use these here, and we'll say do ping count of 1, and now we can use $1, so our first argument, and then $IP address. So now this is starting to make a little bit more sense, hopefully. So $1 is whatever you put in. So if you're sweeping the network, 192.168.1 would go here, and then sequence 1 through 254. So this would run through your sequence here. So we'll go over that again here in a second when we actually run the script. Let's go ahead and type out the same things we did earlier. So we're going to grep on 64 bytes. We're going to cut a delimiter of a space and field of 4. And then we're going to set the argument to remove the colon. Finally, we'll add the ampersand for threading. We'll type in done. And then when you end an if statement, you actually type in if backwards. So to go over this again, if your first argument is blank, then we're going to echo out usage. Else, we're going to run our ping sweep here. So go ahead and get this typed out. Pause the video if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and Control X and save it. And then we'll run it here. So we need to change the mode. I'm going to just make it +X on ping sweep. Okay, and to test our if statement, I'm going to leave it blank. So you see now there's no argument there. So because we had no argument, it echoed back how to use the ping sweep script that we just wrote. So now that that's working, let's test out. We'll test out any network. I'm going to say 27. Let's just see if it starts sweeping through the network. Okay, it did, but we saw nothing because we don't have any IP addresses in this network. So let's try it with our network. Okay, so we just returned some IP addresses back in a list here. So you can see that my router came up, one of my machines came up, and several other of my devices. So not the prettiest list, but what we can do as well is we can save this into, we'll call it iplist.txt. And then we can cat our IP list. And I believe if we add a U, well, we should be able to add a unique here somewhere. So if we actually add in sort, let's try that. Okay, so it's giving us our unique addresses. It's one way to organize these IPs. So we can now use this list that we have in a few different ways. We can write more loops. Say now that I wanted to use nmap, which we haven't covered. We could say for IP in $cat IP list.text do nmap. We'll just do a basic scan here of the IP and then say done. So now this is going to take everything in our list that we just produced, and it's going to run through it and run an nmap port scan here on the IP address. So if we look, it should tell us, right, so it's running a scan now, and it's going to go down this list. It's going to take a while, and we haven't covered any of this yet. Just wanted to give an example that there's more usages than just doing a ping sweep here. So you can write for loops for lots of different things you're going to run into in a lot of times in this course. This is just one example. So once again, we have our variable here of our IP address. We can call this whatever we want. I just like calling it IP, it's easy. So for IP address in, we're using cat to pull up the IP list, similar to what we just did here. So we're pulling cat of that list. We're calling every single IP address in this list a variable of IP. And now it's going to nmap through that list, and it's going to produce results. It's probably going to take a while here for each address, but this is what you would see. So really that's it for this lesson. Kind of go back through, try to understand what's going on. And you can see now that some of the IP addresses are coming through. So you can see on my router, nmap scan for 15.1. I've got SSH open. I've got DNS. I've got HTTP. So it's just running a basic port scan through the top 1,000 or so ports. So we'll cover a lot of that too later in the course. And for now, that's it. So like I said, go back through, rewatch this lesson if you need to. You're going to see a lot of scripting in this course as well. And just really try to get a feel for it. Practice with it. Don't just use it on IP addresses. Do grepping and do cut commands, and try it on anything. If you know a Linux command, just try it anywhere. And see if you can filter some results down. It's really fun and really cool once you get the hang of it. It does take a little bit, but it should be a very useful tool to have in your arsenal once you do learn it. So for this lesson, my name is Heath Adams, and I thank you for joining me.